Another interesting quirk about this car is that in order to drive the car, you have to turn on the car using the left side instead of the right side. Porsche did this because of its Formula One heritage. Another interesting quirk about this car is that in order to start the car, you have to start the car from the left side instead of the right side. Porsche did this because during Formula One, they had to run in their races, and in order for them to be able to get in the car quickly and start the car, because most of their cars are manuals, they'll have one hand on the manual gear shifter and then another hand on the key so they can start and go quickly. I find it very interesting how Porsche allocated its money on interior details, especially parts like the dash. I'm a little disappointed with some of their materials, especially on the top of the dash. Yeah, the top of the dash is soft touch, but it isn't really soft touch. It barely passes the soft touch test. And on top of that, the doors, if you can tell over here, the door is hard touch over here, and most cars have stitched leather, especially if you're paying upwards to $40,000 to $75,000 to $90,000. The bare minimum that I think that they could have done was add at least a soft touch insert or add a softer touch armrest here. Another weird thing about Porsches is where that they choose to put their buttons. So if you look up here, this is right by the infotainment unit, but in this car, it is weirdly located by the lights in the car, which I found is the lights and the sunroof controls, which I found was very interesting. Another interesting quirk about this car is the multitude of buttons this car has. Just in the center dash, it looks like it has more than 40 buttons, which is kind of crazy, especially when you're driving, because when you're driving, you want to try to stay as focused as possible, and I find it a little bit difficult, especially when you first drive the car. After some time, you'll get comfortable with it, but to learn what each button does and know where to touch to get to certain aspects, like all the light controls are here, but this car has another weird thing about it. It has two separate buttons to control the sunroof. So to close the shade of the sunroof, it's a button right here. To open the sunroof, it's this button right here, and you pull it down, which I found was another interesting thing. A few other weird things about this car are the buttons on the side over here. So this car has the trunk open button right next to the window locking button, which above all of that are the mirror controls. I just feel as though that Porsche really didn't organize where they put each button. Another cool thing about this car is that they put a center clock in the car, which in the sports chrono package cars looks like a rev counter. But it's really cool because you can time how fast you're going, you can time the speed that you're going on a racetrack. It's a very cool feature. Another cool thing about this car is the use of aluminum that they've used. I think it brings so much nice contrast to such a dark interior. It gives the interior so much light with all of their buttons having a little bit of chrome on them. It brings the car up to another level and to another standard than it would have been before. Another cool thing about this car is that this car has three-way positioned passenger seats, which I find is cool, but I've never really been in a car other than my own car that has memory passenger seats that have three-way memory passenger seats. Like I've never really been in a car that's like that. I really appreciate the Bose sound system of this car. Typically I really appreciate the Bose sound system in the car. It has really great lows, and it has amazing bass, which I was shocked in a Bose system. The other thing that I really like about this car is how tactile all of the buttons feel. Every button feels like a tactile button, you know, like it's a very cool, unique feature about the car. Like everything, if you want to touch something, then you get a tactile response. I also love the paddle shifters. Like the paddle shifters feel really nice. They're not cheap, they're not chintzy. You can tell they're made out of real metal because they're cold right now because the air conditioning's blowing. And I like how this car has a center screen in the gauge cluster, so therefore, like, instead of having to look to the side to look at the screen, you can just look straight. You can look straight ahead instead of looking to the left and to the right. One thing that's disappointing about this car is how little storage space this car has. The door pockets are pretty minuscule. The car has a tiny center console. The glove compartment is okay size, but it's not the greatest. There's no space underneath the center console, and there's barely any space. And I feel like Porsche, for their next iteration of this car, should really focus on the more practical aspects of this car, because this is supposed to be a car that most kids can drive, you know. This is supposed to be a car that most people can drive, you know. It isn't like regulated to like sports cars enthusiasts, even though it's the sportiest option in the segment. I think that Porsche should really spend some more time on the I feel like Porsche should spend more time on the ergonomics of the interior. Okay. You can use most of the functions. For instance, you can use all of the infotainment functions inside of the center tach, or you can choose to use all of the center infotainment functions inside the center screen. Like, you can choose and play around with how you want this car, and this car is so incredibly customizable. One thing about Porsches that makes Porsche so unique is how customizable. Something that makes Porsche so unique is how customizable they are. You can get neon orange seatbelts, you can get red trim, you can literally customize this car to your heart's content. And that's the thing that makes them so interesting, is that every single aspect of the car can be changed to your own preference. And I find that so fascinating and so interesting. Okay, that's good. It's an incredible sunroof that goes from the front seats all the way to the back. Another thing I really appreciate about this car is how sick the steering wheel is. The car has a few buttons on the side. One controls the center screen. The other controls like small basic functions like calling, your trip odometer, and so on and so forth. And it has like this really cool surround with aluminum, with this really nice leather, with this really cool like indentations in the steering wheel. Like, I just find the steering wheel incredibly sick on this kind of car. Like, it's a really cool steering wheel. And then to top it off, it has these really sick paddle shifters that just add so much like cool functionality and so much like cool design into this car. Another thing that I want to mention is that this car has incredibly comfortable seats. These seats are amazing. Like, how soft and comfortable they are, it's crazy. I think that another thing that I definitely want to spend time on is Porsche's attention to detail. Every single thing on this car is perfectly put together. There are no big seams anywhere. There are no creaks, no rattles, no nothing. The way that they put these cars together is incredible. They spend so much time and effort on every single little detail about this car, and I really appreciate that, especially coming from a car enthusiast. Full sunroof that goes from the front seats all the way to the back seats. Another thing that's amazing about this car is the build quality. As you could hear, the doors have an incredibly substantial sound. I'm in the middle, you can't really tell, but I have maybe like a hand width of space behind me, considering about an An unfortunate thing about this car is how this car is ergonomically shaped. The seats are very lean back, which is amazing for road trips. But if I lean my head back, my head's touching the ceiling, as well as the legroom isn't plentiful for me, and I'm about 6 foot. So I want you to keep that in mind if you're interested in shopping in this car. This car doesn't have the most space, but considering what you're getting and for the cost of the car, you're getting a lot for your money. Like, all the other competitors to this car can't compete on the same level because they don't provide everything this car provides at such an amazing package. This car is amazing at everything. And I feel like if you're gonna consider this car, you definitely gotta look at the other options, but you'll definitely tell that this car stands out compared to the other ones. So this car also has two USB ports in the bottom and center controlled climate control, where you can change it based off a little toggle switch, which I find is really cool, and heated rear seats. This car also has a folded cup holder, and it has manual sunshades, which you can just pull right up like this. But this car has these seats are something else. These seats are incredibly comfortable. They're very plush. They're a little bit on the stiff side, but knowing that they're stiffer, they're probably gonna last more time. This car also has 2 lights on both sides and a coat hanger on this side. This vehicle that you see here today is a 2018 Porsche Macan S. This car has a twin turbocharged V6 engine that produces 340 horsepower and 339 pound-feet of torque. It puts this power through a 7-speed PDK transmission with all-wheel drive. This car goes 0 to 60 in approximately 5 seconds and will receive 17 city and 23 highway. Competitors to this car are the Audi SQ5, the BMW M40i, and the Mercedes GLC. The competitors to this car are the Audi SQ5, BMW X3 M40i, and the Mercedes GLC 43. The quirk with this car is that there are 4 little dots that are inside the headlight module, and then the other daytime running light when the car's on is this little light strip that also acts as a blinker. So another quirk, you'll see with this car, is the clamshell hood. Another interesting feature of this car is that you can put your hand through the hood, and the hood goes to where a typical fender would lie. Another interesting thing about this is that the car has air inlets where it allows the engine to breathe more when you're going higher speeds. Okay, so the first impressions of this car are very good. I think one thing that really stands out to me is how smooth this car feels. This car is a very linear transmission, therefore you can't feel any smooths. Porsche, Volkswagen, Audi have always mastered their transmissions, making them incredibly smooth, therefore you can't feel any shifts. This car has a very linear brakes, so therefore they're not sharp or aggressive, but they have incredible braking power if you really step on them. The car also's engine is incredibly smooth, like you don't really feel much when you press on the gas. Another nice thing about this car is how rich the exhaust note is on this car. This car has incredibly responsive steering, so if you even slightly turn the steering wheel, this car will instantly move. Another thing that I'm not used to think that there are a few things that Porsche skimped on. I think there's a few things that Porsche skimped on, especially like their padding on the center armrest, their ergonomics, and how much space that they allocate. I think another thing that Porsche could work on is giving the interior more space, having more cubby holes, more storage space. But for the most part, this is an amazing car, and it accomplishes everything that it needs to accomplish at an incredible price. I think if you're looking into a BMW X3 M40i, a Mercedes GLC 43, I think you definitely need to give the Porsche Macan as a second look, because this car can do everything that those cars can do, but this car can do it a lot better. Please like, subscribe, and follow me on all social medias below, and I hope you enjoyed this video.